Okay, thank you so much for joining me on another episode of Public Comment, where I chat about philosophy and politics for critical, creative, and introspective writers. But gotta tell you the truth, I'm thinking about rebranding a little bit and thinking about using the term memoir. Thinking of saying, welcome to Public Comment, the memoir of Sean O'Connor. Something like that. A memoir about philosophy and politics. A memoir about thinking about philosophy and politics. Something like that. I get concerned always about branding and categorizing things. Here's something for you to think about. What's the difference between an autobiography and a memoir? What's the difference between a memoir and a personal essay? And who exactly decides? That was one of the things that troubled me about poetry, was who exactly is the definer of poetry, or why is what that person says is the definition of poetry the definition of poetry? Is there something so distinct about certain more man-made or human-made concepts that anybody can define them? Does that become too postmodern, on the other hand? We can't live without definition, otherwise we won't be able to speak to each other. So, either way, there's conversations we had about that. Today, I will be chatting chiefly about cynicism, meaning, and purpose. Yes, it's a deep one, ladies and gentlemen. Perhaps emotional, too. I had a very emotional day yesterday. I had one of the most emotional days on record. Well, now it's on the record. But, I mean, the better way to put it is it was one of the most emotional days of my life. It was just one of those days where you're really thinking about cynicism, meaning, and purpose. I couldn't be more literal about where my mind was. So, I shall begin with a story. It was earlier in the morning, and I can't tell you who I was talking to, because all of the characters of the folks I tell you about are anonymous unless I have permission to chat with you about them by disclosing their identities. So this person, I am hiding this person's identity for the time being. Anyway, I found myself asking this individual, would this person offer me some advice on writing a business plan? I said, I'm writing a business plan. I'm trying to wrap my mind around this podcast project that I'm doing, and I want to really be comprehensive and responsible and thoughtful about what I'm doing here. And this individual said, well, what are you really writing a business plan for? What purpose, really? And I said, well, the truth is, I want to demonstrate to my wife, and I want to demonstrate to the people that I love, that I'm really putting thought into what I'm doing here. I told you yesterday that I was interested in what it means to bring people in to one's entrepreneurial activities and thinking, and that one of the chief items of advice I had received was that it would be advisable to create a business plan if you hadn't already, and let them in on it, as well as talking them through the sense of growth and development that you've perceived. So I was telling this individual about that, and this individual had a very sort of cynical outlook from the get-go here, as this individual began asking me more specifically than what is it that I specifically sought out to monetize. And The gist of it, this individual said, was, you know yourself. You know your topic. You're obviously a smart, charismatic person with a pleasing personality, but what you don't necessarily know is other people. And you have to ask yourself, why is someone going to care about what you have to say? People don't like to part from their money. Nobody likes to part from their money. Why is someone going to want to part from their money? Someone sees his pen, and his pen is worth $2. This person wants to get the pen for $1.50 and feel that they are getting it for more than it's worth. People don't like to part with their money, so why is someone going to want to part with theirs to listen to you? And then this person said, on the other hand, if you really want to get people interested in you, then you have to lie. Or not necessarily a lie, just sort of say something that's not quite true. Something provocative, something to poke at them and get their attention. I said, do you really believe that you have to lie or be deceptive, essentially cheat, to get ahead? And this individual said, it's an awful thing, but yes. This individual said, everybody does it. Everybody lies. Everybody cheats because everybody else does it. And it is the only way to get ahead. If you care about making money, then you will tell a lie or two to move on. And this person cited examples in the current news media that this person believed were lies. Some of it don't agree with the assumptions that this individual had. For example, that the testimony of Dr. Christine Blasey Ford last late summer, I think it was, or was it the beginning of the fall by then, said that this individual said that it was this individual's belief that that testimony had been paid for, and that it was it was a lie for media attention and for a political purpose. And I thought, wow, that is a very cynical point of view. And this person said, well, you have to be cynical. You have to be cynical. And one thing that occurred to me, that struck me, as I was wrapping my mind around what this person said, was one thing that I did note was, and I believe I said something to you about this yesterday, was that it did occur to me that people seem, at least on the surface, and I can't stereotype here or make an overgeneralization quite, but it does seem that if you just listen to people, that money is like a supreme and overwhelming social concern these days. That is to say, listen to people close enough, and it would seem that unless they're doing quite well, and in fact even many, if they are doing quite well, seem to have a very deep concern these days for their financial well-being and money. Even on television yesterday, I think it was, on MSNBC, a historian, not Michael Beschloss, the other historian, his name escapes me at the moment, so I apologize to him and to y'all, because I was trying to give your name someone here and I couldn't remember it. I have no idea why I just broke into a southern accent. It's just something I decided to do. It was entirely spontaneous. The coffee is still kicking in, ladies and gentlemen. In fact, I'm going to take off the cap so that I can drink more of the coffee and it can faster, and so it can kick in faster. I enjoy my caffeine. Am I talking too soft for you? I'm not talking directly into the mic. It's not a big microphone, so if I were to talk into the mic, for those of you who are watching the video, I would look like this. So it's just not, the mic isn't it's not an elevated thing. All I can really do is get closer to the screen, is like the best I could do. So I guess I'll do that. Then this person said, if I were you, I would join a corporation. You have a pleasing personality. You can talk. You make a lot of money. And then I told someone else this too. I said to this other person that this other person suggested I just join a corporation, and that person said something to the effect of, be just another cog on the wheel. I thought, yes. The funny thing was this idea that I should just join a corporation would seem to miss the point of my entire soul. My entire purpose for being was pretty much like the opposite intention in life. So, when you get... I say be mindful of the feedback people offer you, because, on the one hand, you can't be dogmatically close to it. On the other hand, you can't be dogmatically open to it. And when someone's advice is for you to do the opposite of what is truly within you in a sense of purpose, well, either that person, right, you'll be able to deem as quite full of it, or, misinformed in some way, or you ask yourself, are you? But, you do want to think about people, what they say, I guess, but you also want to have some self-respect and some sense of resolve, too. Because this person also said something else that was very interesting. This person also said, you don't necessarily need to act on what I'm saying, and you could disagree with me. And this person also added, and I thought this was interesting, this person said, leadership is a lonely road. That I thought was true. Amen. Leadership can be, anyway, a lonely road. True leadership. That is to say, if you stand for something and the people around you don't stand for something, and you are motivated to sort of lead in building up confidence, trying to build up confidence in that which you believe in within this crowd of people, in that sense you would become a leader, and it would be lonely until you suddenly had won over people's confidence to this end. So there was a certain accuracy to that. I do listen to people's feedback. Another friend of mine, I really doubt he would mind if I shared his identity, because he's good with a crowd. Johnny Cashmere, former wrestler, smart guy, urged me to make sure that I have a personality and that I'm not all opinion or all like politics or all about the podcast, that I have a sense of self. I don't know. I think that's easier. That's true. That is to say, I do want to make sure that I share with people a sense of, just like human experience. Of course, when you're trying to make it and you've only got so much time, and your resources are limited in terms of moving your objectives forward, it just isn't always necessarily the case, is it, that it's so easy to time manage. Anyway, so there's a second story here. I was helping a student. Obviously, I can't tell you who that student is. That would actually be unethical and illegal. And I can't tell you who the professor of the student is. That, too, would breach certain privacy rights and things of that sort. I can tell you, though, that this student told me that this student's professor told them to write a thesis in which this person argues that art is a waste of time. And I said, first of all, I said, do you really agree with this? And the person said, no, this is just a bullshit essay I'm writing because my professor said to do that. And I shook my head, what? That can't be. I don't know. And I say, well, if you're going to argue against the purpose, that art having any purpose, then you should at least, let's really argue this. Let's bolster your arguments here. And the person said, no, my professor said this is pretty much just fine. And I'm like, okay. That wasn't objectively true at all, but that's no disrespect to the student, because the student, if the student is being honest, is just telling me what the student says the professor is telling the student. So then we start to really read through this student's essay, and the student is saying things like, well, first of all, artists just don't make money, so it's a waste of time. There is no real career for an artist, so it's just a waste of time. Artists don't create cures for diseases, so art is just a waste of time. So there's like a sort of, intellectual and professional connection I'm trying to make into the situation, and there's a personal one. On a personal level, as someone who considers himself pretty artistic, it's like, to quote Bob Dylan, a corkscrew to my heart. It would be one thing, certainly, if this professor wanted the student to really wrap the minds around the different debates for what a purpose for art may or may not be. But this was not an intellectual engagement with the topic. This was clearly the student's self being of the understanding, as conveyed to me, if the student is being honest, that the professor had no real investment in what the student was actually saying, and that the student was just supposed to say this. And the expectations beyond that were just something I couldn't relate to. I found this extraordinarily troubling. And, even to take it further, it would turn out things I'd learned about how you write an essay. I only got a 3.98 on my GPA, right? So what do I know about, essay writing classes? At least X amount of professors, 99.9% of them, were happy enough with my essays to give me A's, so maybe they were just BSing me, or maybe I know something about writing essays. But it would turn out that everything I supposedly know about it, every single time I gave a thought, no, my professor said not to do that. No, my professor said not to do that. I'm like, well, your professor just seems to be going, down the road not taken here, and I'm not really sure what to tell you, because honestly, it's not for me to offer a position on what this professor's it's not for me to play the part of dean in this case, right? It's not for me to, hierarchically speaking, I'm not in charge of professors, let's put it that way. Credentially speaking, regardless of how much knowledge or thoughtfulness I may have, I don't have the credentials which enable me to necessarily have an opinion that others will consider of weight in the context of a school of a group of professors who think in that way, right? So, what am I to do about it? Except feel like, wow. There you've got someone who's credentialed to be a professor who it would seem to me is frankly teaching nonsense. Again, either that or the student is having troubled perception or interpretation. And that, I wasn't able to tell. You can only go on what the student's telling you. But supposing it's the case that this professor maybe is not really doing what this professor is supposed to be doing. That put me in a bad mood because, well, I may only have a bachelor's degree, but it would seem that, felt sort of like I could be a little bit more on track than this professor. But this professor gets to call this professor, a professor gets to call him or herself a professor by virtue of the pieces of paper that this person has won the opportunity to have his or her name on. And, all intellectually responsible efforts are meaningless to many institutions if you don't have that piece of paper. And what can you do? I mean, that's just too bad. That started making me feel very cynical, too. Because, I don't necessarily have the money to go dive back into academia and compete against that. Nor do I necessarily know that it would be logical to. I'm not sure that there is an encouraging prognosis for academia in the next 20 years. No disrespect. Look, if I thought that academia was in a better direction, I'd probably want to spend the rest of my life there, because theoretically, I love what universities are. Practically speaking, though, universities are going the other way. They're hemorrhaging money, and it would also appear that because they're hemorrhaging money, they are ridden with anxious people and standards that aren't necessarily always rational or based on your GPA or your academic excellence or anything like that. I don't mean to toot my own horn or anything, but I certainly gave my damn soul to academia while I was going to college. I gave my damn soul and was not really recognized for that. I'm not trying to toot my own horn. I'm a narcissist, but it would seem that even though I went literally above and beyond what was asked of me, it's nice to be told you have a good GPA and that you did a good job, but, if it was the respect of others and an invitation to work with them and all of that, well, that just ain't how it works. That ain't how it goes. And speaking of the temptation to become a cynic, there's an open door for it. You're heartbroken. I'm not going to lie, academia broke my heart. It really did, because I really, really wanted to be a professor. More than anything. That's what I really wanted to be. I saw myself as that kind of person. I saw myself who, at his best, was somebody who could understand aesthetics, understand communication, and understand philosophy, and understand politics, and understand history, and understand literature. That I could understand these things, and that I could help people fall in love with these kinds of topics. And that could be of service to the community, the global community, by offering my impassioned class-led discussions on these things, and write my things, and that it would be that simple. Woe was me, though. I was a fool, and I was naive, and I did have my heart broken by that. And not only that, I had relationships with professors that I really looked up to, that I believed viewed me as a protege. I had professors that I thought saw in me something more than money that was flowing into the university or college that they worked for. And it would seem that once I was not blatantly contributing to that cause that I was suddenly just not really worth talking to anymore. Despite the fact that, I sure did my studying up on these people. They tell you if you want to go and work in academia to find the people you really want to study with and research under. Know what they do. Know it really well. And understand how you can help them with that. That's exactly what I did. Sometimes I feel like it was just a waste of time. Because, I spent money. I spent money I didn't even necessarily have to ensure that I had access to the work of these professors and that I could analyze the hell out of it. And that I could have something to offer them that no one else could, that I would plunge into it deeper. I'd lose a little bit more sleep. It turned out to be a waste of my money and a waste of my time. Academia did not want me. And it turns out to me that I don't find it very desirable either. That's sad to say, because I think in a more ideal world, academia is a beautiful thing, perhaps. But now I see, pragmatically speaking, and objectively speaking, it's actually media and art and philosophy I consider as such super necessary and surpassing the universities. That's sad when you think about it culturally. I don't know if it's been this way earlier in time, but the evidence suggests to me that the universities have lost their clout. The universities have lost the kind of respectability that they used to have. The universities have lost their place as these are the niches within society where the intellectuals are welcome. The intellectuals are encouraged. The intellectuals will have a home to make this world a better place by what they're best at. That's not what I get out of it. What I get out of university now is taking a lot of people's money from them. Yeah, some people will be lucky enough to get a scholarship, but everybody else is paying and going up the wazoo in debt to do it. And it's making a lot of people some money. And I'm not even... The irony is that professors aren't even necessarily all that handsomely paid, really. But the system is such that you got to keep the numbers going up, and you got to keep the money coming in, and that's that. And I'm not sure how much it actually has to do with these beautiful things that philosophers talk about and lovers of the academy, truth, advancement of knowledge, not for merely the sake of advancing knowledge, but because it's supposed to truly serve humanity, make it a better place. That it's truly humanitarian. Not in theory, but in practice and in theory. I don't get that impression at all. I get the impression that it is a business. Fine. That friend of mine I told you about earlier, who did paint a picture of reality that was a bit cynical, wasn't 100% wrong. There are a number of people in our society who really only care, or whose priority at the end of the day is making enough money in this rat race to feel what it is they need to feel. That it has, and it's not just creature comforts. It's not just like the basics. They just want money. Money, 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 money. And it's depressing as hell. And you think back to what that student was saying about how art is pointless because it doesn't make money or cure diseases. So, to anyone who's ever had a creative impulse, to anyone who's ever had the audacity to not march to the tune which they were told they need to march to, and that's that. Right? Fuck you, right? That's the way it comes across. That's what the theory appears to mean. And I mean, this student wasn't even being challenged to contemplate that, really. Because just get the student through the system. Whatever. Do what you gotta do to get this student to fulfill a certain XYZ of criteria so that this professor can say that this professor got one more student to pass and keep this professor's job and keep the money coming in. Keep the students coming in. Keep the money coming in. Money. What is it Bob Dylan said? Money doesn't talk, it swears. Sometimes that's the case. But here's the question I want to ask you, ladies and gentlemen. Here's the question I want to ask you. Are we really supposed to accept this cynicism? Are we supposed to turn cynical? Just because we get exposed to things that tempt us to do so? I wonder. But I refuse to feel that way. I wanted to. I was driving home last night, letting these things sort of swirl in my mind, thinking, everything I do and say just doesn't matter. Because it doesn't conform to this paradigm of wanting to fuck people out of their money, so to speak. It seems as if I don't care about money to a fault. Don't get me wrong. Obviously, I want money. Obviously, I ask for it. But I mean, I just am troubled by how motivated people are to prize money over the thing which they really are supposed to be doing. What is it we're supposed to be doing? I guess that's the other thing. Right? That comes to questions of meaning and purpose. With cynicism, you see, comes the temptation, therefore, to follow that with nihilism. I think Nietzsche touches on some of this because, if we go back into our philosophy books, ladies and gentlemen, and think about the great philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche. I mean, what's going on in the context of his time when he sees that everybody is just full of power claims and religion and BS? Lies to try to get you to do what they want you to do so that they can control you. And, Nietzsche says essentially that there is going to be, if you're an intellectually responsible person, there's going to be perhaps this inevitable experience of you saying, to quote Robin Williams, fuck it all. And you're going to go through sort of a period of bleakness in which everything appears really to have no meaning because all of the meaning that's been presented to you just doesn't seem to gel, doesn't seem to be right. And where then do you even come up with an idea of what right is supposed to mean? Because all meaning has been obliterated. But let's wrap our minds around this notion of a possible cynical and nihilistic reality. So, what do you want to be when you grow up? Well, only really what your parents say you should do, right? certain things you just shouldn't do. I want to be a pianist. No. Pianists don't make money, sweetheart. Try again. Well, I want to be a doctor. There you go. I want to be a philosopher. No, you don't. Philosophers don't make money. Philosophers have no practical use in society. Don't do that. Oh, okay. Oh, yeah. I shouldn't be like thinking and stuff. There's no practical use to that. Oh, okay. You tell me not to do that, so I'm not going to do it. And look at politics. One day, I want to be the president of the United States of America. Psh, you don't come from money. You don't have an Oxford education. It's not the 1940s anymore where your Harry Trumans who didn't go to college can pull it off. Times are different now. Go to business school. I want to invent something. That's all been invented. Well, actually, if you're interested in like cybersecurity or computer stuff, then you're probably in the right time and place. I don't know that people are really going to talk you out of that. But how dare you be anything which they might accuse you of being esoteric, thoughtful, abstract. I want to be a art curator. Yeah, well, the competition is really stiff. I want to be a journalist. Well, how many internships have you had? None? Yeah. You should probably have had 2 internships by now if you really want to be in the media industry. Yeah, I'm sorry. I mean, we're just supposed to accept that? I've got a business idea. I've got an idea. Yes, but what capital do you have to fund this idea of yours? Well, I don't. I'm going to try and find an investor. Ha! An investor? These days? It's not what you know, buddy. It's who you know. You don't have those kind of connections. And your business idea is just not practical. I mean, it's depressing to listen day in and day out to this mantra of rejections of what is essentially the arts and the humanities, really. I guess you could say. Or even, more broadly speaking, rejection of challenging the system. Look, think about politics is often good because it's sort of like a microcosm of like how can gauge certain things that are going on. Think about the conflict between Nancy Pelosi and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and what the significance of this is. Yes. From one point of view, by the way, it could be that Ocasio-Cortez, I don't know, maybe you accuse her of picking a fight, of being a little overdramatic, not so completely thoughtful about what she's doing. On the other hand, Nancy Pelosi could be a little bit degrading, right? But think about the bigger picture, what we're really looking at here. We're looking at Queen Nancy on the top, like 78 years old, has been in politics for a very long time, and is saying, this is how it is. And you've got Ocasio-Cortez saying, no, I'm not so sure this is the way it is. And you've got Nancy saying, yeah, you and your 4 little friends on Twitter. Yeah, keep telling yourself that, sweetie. This is how it is. That's the world we live in. I mean, I view that as, like, not right. Again, we could say what we will about the substance of what either Nancy or AOC is actually saying. To me, that's besides the point if you actually look at the abstract picture of what's going on. And that is trying to think outside the status quo is like not an easy thing to do these days. Minds appear to me like so cemented by this accepted view of reality as dark and cynical, and you're told what you do and you don't really challenge it. It's like, oh, Joe Biden is just supposed to be the next nominee. He's the one that can win. That's what the polls say anyway. I mean, what did the polls say about Donald Trump? Oh, well, the polls were wrong that time, but we've fixed them now and we've accounted for all of that. Really? I don't know. Why do we live? Like, what's the point of all of this? You know, I think it's one of the first times where I've thought that the sort of irony that actually I've never seen philosophy be more practically necessary than I do at this very moment in time that I'm talking to you. And I look at the world around me and I say, is this it? Is this what it's all about? Is this why I live? To feed the system that I reject? And leave it at that? Is this what I live for? Forgive me for daring to suggest it, but isn't that the kind of thing that might tempt someone to want to kill themselves? I'm being serious. Why would you want to live for something that means nothing to you? I mean, I'm not like trying to be like hyperbolic or anything or say there aren't good things about reality. That's not. I'm trying to make a point that speaking, let's say, metaphysically, or in your view of reality, your view of humanity, your view of society, your view of the way things are supposed to be, your view of ethics, like what is a person supposed to do? Why does a person live? And if all of those things which you believe you should live for are constantly being rejected, then you are at a crossroads, aren't you? Where either you give up and surrender your soul and you say, fine, I quit. You're right. There is no real meaning other than that which I am told is. Regardless of how objective I might be, or rational, or just, none of that matters. Justice doesn't matter, ethics doesn't matter, truth doesn't matter. Only the system and the arbitrary rulers of the system today, and what they say, only that order matters. Or, what is it Shakespeare says? Wow, this would be the first time in my life I think I've ever been compelled to quote Shakespeare. What does he say? To be or not to be, that is a question. Whether 'tis nobler in the mind to suffer the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, or to take arms against the sea of troubles, and by opposing end them. Fair question. Whether 'tis nobler in the mind to suffer the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, take arms against the sea of troubles, and by opposing end them. To be or not to be, That is the question. Whether 'tis nobler in the mind to suffer the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune. To be, what does that mean? Right? To be me. To stand for what I believe in. If you're an existentialist, you would say to have some say in my meaning and purpose, or to be handed my meaning and purpose. To be handed my meaning and purpose and just take it and lose my soul, and not to be, therefore, but to just sort of be in only a literal sense, in a physical sense, but not necessarily in a spiritual sense. Or to be like, to say, these are my thoughts, these are my desires, these are my beliefs, these are my motivations, this is why I get up in the morning, and this is what I'm going to pursue. And which one do you choose? There's a difference between being a cynic and not being a cynic, put in the abstract. And I mean, we could chew this longer and we could have more specifics, more concretes, and there's more to say on this. This will not be the only time I go on about cynicism, meaning, and purpose, but I think the conversation is such that we ask ourselves, do we look at the world around us and accept it as it is? Or do we strive to say, I think it can be better, and fight for our vision of what better means? And what does it mean to do that, by the way? Because I'm being really abstract. Does it necessarily have to be like, either you completely surrender your soul, or you are in a state of revolution? Does it have to be that extreme? A good friend of mine yesterday said whenever everything is either this or either that this person gets uncomfortable and starts to get suspicious of that kind of claim. Right? But for the sake of thought here, in which direction do we want to go? And why do we want to go in that direction? Look, I'm just going to close by saying this for the day. Maybe you live more than once. Maybe you go somewhere when you die. We don't have much evidence of that. Maybe we don't have any real evidence of that. But, right, metaphysically speaking, physically speaking, odds are this may be, it may be that YOLO, you only live once. And in an activated state of being, you have desires, things mean something to you, and you want to be you. And the world may have disappointing ways about it. I mean, death, disease, violence. Disasters, these things happen. And we wonder sometimes why we are put on this earth to see things that tempt us to think at the end of the day that it's just a lot of pain. Unbearable, right? But what do you dream of? What gets your imagination going? What kind of hopes do you experience? Do you really want to extinguish that? Yeah. Might be disappointed again and again and again. Life is a lot of disappointment. But is that the world you want to leave behind for posterity? When you look at the different kinds of improvements we've made and, how far we've come, and some people think we haven't really come all that far at all, that there's a mirage of technology or something. But I find that to be a mischaracterization. More people today live better than they did 300 years ago. So the evidence suggests that meaning and purpose, making these lives of ours, ever better. It's that or give it up. What do you want to do? Me, I'm motivated to keep on keeping on about what I believe in. Because you only live once. And I want to experience the joys of consciousness. I want to experience the joys of wrapping my mind around things. I want to experience the joy of thinking. I want to experience the joy of relationships. And I want to experience the joy of existence. And hell, if I've got to be a bit of a rebel to make my point, if that's the kind of world we're in today, fine. If that's what it's got to be. Is it frustrating sometimes? And lonely sometimes? Yes. But, think about those things which humanity has fought for thus far. American Revolution, so that we didn't have to answer to royalty, and king and queen. Civil rights movement. These medical advances, the internet, all the things we've worked so hard for. I think in my life, of all the things I've worked hard for, I don't want it to all be in vain. I don't want it to all have been for nothing. And maybe at the end of the day, the universe obliterates itself or something, and everything we've ever striven for means nothing. But that we can make it have meaning for at least as long as it can. I mean, it's that or not. I'll leave you with this. I love living in a world where Proust exists, where Montaigne exists, where Van Gogh exists. I love living in a world where there are records of people in the past who sought out so deeply what their lives meant. That makes this life of mine better. Thank you so much for your time. Obviously, your thoughts and all of that are cool, and I want to know. Shout out, as they say, to my amazing wife, Ashley O'Connor. She asked a question: do you think it is the liberal arts degrees in particular that are ending in less jobs and opportunities? I mean, it has been known for a while that a bachelor, and I think something didn't get fully typed there. There's a question, is it a liberal arts degree that's troubling, or is it culture more widely that's troubling, especially like in economic thing? I do think that a large part of it has to do with the trouble of a liberal arts degree being that it might make someone more of a generalist than is desired in a niche economy. or that there is less apparent demand necessarily for a lot of sort of creative projects. Sometimes it seems, unless you know the right people. But I also think that we just live in a time of severe economic anxiety because, I mean, jobs are going to be lost to automation. Jobs are being lost to automation, will continue to be lost to automation. And with mass immigration to more secularized, tolerant countries or humane countries, people are holding on tighter to their resources and motivated to cling to things like racism and nationalism and all these kinds of ideologies that translate to their own protectiveness over their resources. Because not everybody wants to share, or not everybody was provided an education or set up so that they could feel self-confident about the resources they could themselves get in life. And that's my perception of it. So thanks, guys. You can always, if you didn't like watching the video, you can listen to the audio, the podcast. There are a lot of different ways you can get it. publiccomment.blog. You can get it on Spotify, Podbean, you name it. Of course, I'll make all those links available to you. But thank you so much for your time. I'll chat with you later. Bye.